So we're coming up on 7. Who else? Who are we missing that might be joining us tonight?
Possibly Tony, but he's not feeling real well.
Oh, okay. Did he have chemo today?
Yesterday,
Okay.
and he was very nauseated all last night and all day long today.
Okay. Okay. Well, Christopher, I'm the president of the club, and you're one of my favorites. I think one of the very first meetings I ever came to this club, you were in Santa Maria and you judged for us in person, and I was overwhelmed.
Cheryl, it's already graded, so this won't get you a better score.
I realize that. You just street photography, and you had some images of your own, and they were just wonderful. You so impressed me. So thank you for agreeing to come and help us again tonight.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and any opportunity actually to share and look at work. If I have time, I'm always up for it. I would say every time I look at work, I learn. I think one of the fun things is I have an opportunity to share my feelings with other people that share a common passion. I put in the chat for everybody. I've been doing a lot of retouching lately. One of the hats that I wear, I work for Deckers, and with a team of about 20 photographers. Almost all of them are former students, and I started. I tried listening to the radio, and it didn't work. And then I started listening to way too many murder mysteries, and I got really concerned about dying everywhere. And I stumbled upon a podcast about art, and it's for non-PhD speaking people. So it's very, very digestible by the commoner, I would say. So I'm right there, and it goes through a piece of art, one piece at a time, and each segment's about 15 to 30 minutes, and it's wonderful. I mean, and I thought I'd share it with you guys if anybody has any boring computer work to do or has to drive somewhere. There's some amazing interviews, and I will say it's up to my vocabulary, so I can sound smarter in front of my students. But it's called The Lonely Palette, and it's by a former.
How do we make it go away?
I think she was
write it down
at the art museum in Boston, but I thought I'd share it. And it does photography as well. They've got some photos in there, both their Ansel Adams and some Cara Mae Weems, so historical and contemporary. And one of my favorite things that she said that I use all the time now is that every piece of art was contemporary when it was created, and I love that. When we talk about the Mona Lisa or talk about Ansel Adams' photograph overlooking the Snake River, in the 1930s, when he created it, it was contemporary. It was created for that day. So if you're interested, I thought I'd share. The other thing too, this was a really fun contest to look at because you took on one of the serious challenges that I have with students, and that is working with the still life. And I greatly appreciate the time and effort that a lot of you put into this, and I'm sure we'll have some fun dialogue.
Oh, good.
Do we have any other club business before we start?
I don't think so.
I have something.
Oh, okay. Go, Penny.
We have the end of the month field trip on the 25th or 6th, I can't remember now, Sunday, end of the month, to Trilogy in Napomo, the housing development. They're having their, I don't know how many they've done, but they have a curated car show. So they've got some special cars, better than your average car show, I think.
It's the 25th
that will be there
from 10 to 4.
Yeah, thank you.
And when did you say it was? I'm sorry, I was writing something down.
25th from 10 to 4.
It's
But-
in Napomo.
In the
at
poem,
the
okay,
Trilogy.
Trilogy
Okay.
Housing Development.
And it's
The
always
golf
packed,
course
so
homes.
go early.
Yeah, so we're gonna
Not
be
to
there a
miss.
little early because it, yeah, beat the crowd. Yeah, it works good. And we're talking about in October going to the air show down at the Santa Maria Airport. Ed and I are probably going to be out of town, so if anyone's interested to lead that trip, that field trip to go to the air show, please let me know. I'm looking for a substitute for myself. Thank you.
Okay, well,
Penny.
I guess we can
And I see
start.
Tony's joined us.
Yes, he did.
hey, Tony,
Hey,
To have you with us tonight, Tony.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you could make it.
Yeah, it's been rough. My first chemo was yesterday.
How's your
Oh.
stomach?
Nauseous,
Yeah.
hands cold. That oxyplatin's a killer.
Well, that's the idea, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. It's poison, but it's more poisonous to any cancer cells than it is to your ordinary cells.
Yeah.
Yeah. All that stuff is just
it
brutal.
just leaves your cells as
That's the
walking
plan
wounded.
anyway.
Okay.
Right. Good to see you all anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, we're rooting for you, Tony.
Thank you.
I'll remind Christopher that we're going to do a quick run through of the first group of images so everybody gets to see what was entered. Then we'll return to the beginning image and the scorekeepers will announce the name of the image, at which time we'd like Christopher to give us his comments and score. So let's start with color. Everybody seeing it?
Yep.
Okay, we're back for our first image.
So one of the things.
I'm
One of the
sorry,
thi-
this is titled A Bodhi Time Capsule.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
One of the things I tried to do when I looked at your work, and I look at work a lot, and the first thing I do is I always make a blush through it, just like we just did, just so I can kind of get an idea of the group of images, and then the next time I go through it, I start arranging them, and what I actually did was I actually arranged them from what I thought was the strongest to what I thought was the least strongest. And the way I did it was very methodically. Things moved positions a lot. I used to do this with prints on a rack, and we always used to say, let the cream rise to the top. And we typically had a rack with 3 rows. And I'm actually looking at my Lightroom palette, and there's 3 rows. and I had it sort manually, so I could just move them around, and I have conversations with in my head, and I want to make sure everybody understands, no matter who critiques your work, the goal of critique is not ever to say anything negative about an individual. Critique is about an image, and I'm critiquing it from one perspective, and that is just how I look at the world, and I'm honest, and I would never ever say anything to ever disparage anybody, but if I'm given the task of trying to sort these images to what I think is the strongest image, to the weakest image, I'm going to give it my best, and use everything to my knowledge, that I've come across to try to relate to what the photographer is really trying to say. Because to me, photography is a vocabulary, and we're all at different places in our skill set of the vocabulary. And when you look at images a lot, things are easier to read, I would say. And when I looked at these images, I obviously knew that there were some found images, in other words, where somebody goes out and they're constantly looking. I love the quote, by Edward Weston that his son Brett conveyed. He said his dad used to always say, "I should be able to look down at my feet and create an interesting image." And that puts the act of creativity on the photographer and on the act of just purely seeing. How do you see the world? How can I change my point of view? How can I alter what the viewer is going to see? And just the opposite, some of you took the approach of literally an art director and created a still life, which to me are two very, very different things. I find the act of setting up the still life personally more difficult than going and finding, because I can look and look and look and look and look, and I'll finally see something. I've worked on a tabletop set and I've arranged and arranged and arranged, and I've just given up and left sometimes. So when I look at these images, I really appreciate how they're both very different. No matter what you're trying to create, I think an image should always have a subject, meaning it should be a place that the artist is directing me to eventually end up. It might be a long journey. It sometimes can be a quick journey. Sometimes it could be an arduous journey into what really is going to be the focal point, of whatever I'm looking at. I always tell my students, try not to create a Where's Waldo. In other words, it's either there's five subjects and I don't know where to look, or I can't figure out what they're trying to say. And in an example, in this photograph right here, I'm led in by this wonderful leading line of this wall on the left. And as I come into this room, I'm greeted with the ironwork of the bed frame, and then I go across the bed frame and I see some clothes that are hung on the wall. I might dabble my vision up on the top where there's some water damage on the wallpaper. I kind of come down to the trunk, but then I end up in the back of the wall on the portrait of George Washington, or it's either a painting or a photograph, but that's where I kind of end up, and it's amazing how it is framed within a space, which is within a space, and I just love how they were able to lead me to there. Now, one of the things that I think is important is that you contain the viewer. You lead them on this journey, and we kind of end with a message, or end with an idea. And to me, this is all about time. This is about time. This is about different generations. This is about nostalgia as well. I really think that humanity, we're drawn to nostalgia. Every time I am drawn towards nostalgia, I remember reading a book about Paris, and I remember reading that when they built the Palace of Versailles, the reason that they put it where it was is because the trade winds didn't blow off the city that direction. That's how bad the city of Paris smelled. So I think I always remember nostalgia, but I always ground myself in reality. They sewed the queen in her clothes. She bathed once or twice a year. And we walked around in filth. And I think it's like 1 out of 8 people per year died in the city of Philadelphia when it was the capital of the United States. So these were hard times and these were struggling times as well. My only criticism for this image, and it's just really minimal. Um, with the tools that we have, I just would have vignetted the left-hand side of the wall a little bit because to me it's just a little bit bright. It kind of stops me there and doesn't allow me to go all the way back to the wonderful Washington on the back wall. And with Lightroom, with Photoshop, the small gradients these days are not only easy to do, you can put a gradient on that wall and you can only lighten the light area so nobody would even be able to know where that gradient is. I gave it so just to make sure, I'm grading out of 21 and you just want the final score. So I gave it a 17.
Okay. A breakfast of champions.
Uh, it took me a long time to be mature enough to understand that art can be and is allowed to be lowbrow. It doesn't always have to be something that's hung on the wall of the Louvre. It's allowed to make us smile. And it was the artist from California who was a photographer as well as who was John Baldessari, and a lot of his images had a lot of humor in it. Um, it reminds me of I tried to do a photograph when I was a student, and it was supposed to be monochromatic, and I had something similar to this, but I had a bowl full of lettuce, and I put a green bottle of hair shampoo in there, and they're like, "What the hell is this?" And I said, "Well, it's so clean that not only could you clean your head, but you could clean your head of lettuce," and they didn't like it. And so my humor wasn't as successful. The the issue with this photograph, I like the humor. It's fun. Um, it is one of the most difficult things to do, and it's the transition from the ground to the background, and that is why really successful food photographers almost always shoot from above because you don't have to transition that abrupt change because that abrupt change needs to have depth and dimensionality. I would challenge this person that if they had a background that maybe could relate to what's in the foreground, so it could be a kitchen or it could be an automobile shop. I think that would be stronger in the background than just a simple, uh, I would say maybe painted muslin background. Um, I like the idea. I love the humor. I think I would take the humor even further. In other words, have more fun with it, and push our buttons a little bit more. Uh, but because of the background, I gave it a 15.
Chris Everett, Roses in Bloom.
Beautiful arrangement, beautiful palette of color. I mean, I, I, I love the browns. I love to me it kind of reminds me of the old masters. This wonderful oil painting, and I think this would be fun to actually see somebody who could paint it because the arrangement and the color palette is so wonderful. But the one issue I have with this, and I'm going to poke at everybody about this, is I know it's not directly in the middle because I actually got out some crosshairs and measured, but I think it's just a little bit too centered. And the bull, I remember Robert Rauschenberg's target, okay, and the target he painted stopped you. It stopped you because the bullseye is a place of rest, and when you go and rest, you no longer look throughout and investigate throughout the image. To me, sliding the vase slightly to the right and allowing some negative space, and we could then be pulled into the image onto the left over to the right, I think would make it more successful. I always look at the images by Eugene Auger and his shots of Paris, and he would never shoot straight into a storefront. He would always come off to an oblique angle. And just that coming off to the side when it pulls you in and having something not in the center but on the right always seems to be more symmetrical, successful. I had a design teacher. She said she believed that we were either born drawn towards symmetry or drawn towards asymmetry. She said, whatever team that you're on, always create one for the other team. And then when you edit, you have both. And to me, I think this one would be more successful if it was just slightly off center, a little bit, either to the left or to the right. I don't care. It would be fun to experiment with both. But because of that, I gave it a 17.
Elegant dressed chocolate dessert.
I'm waiting to have dinner, and you make me look at this. Food photography, shallow depth of field. It's the go-to nowadays. The soft light coming in through the window. It's all about creating the atmosphere that evokes this response, and this one does. It does make my palate perk up. It does make me think of a fine dessert. And I think so commercially the image, because of that, is successful. I'm drawn to, I think that's a sprig of mint, and the piece of food below it. But there's something dark in the back left, right behind that is vying for my attention just because of the sheer weight of the visual. And to me, even in post, just either reduce that contrast, lighten it a little bit, just so it doesn't make me look back there. I love how the arc kind of brings in from the left, moving over to the right. And I go towards that where the plane of focus is, right on the top of that mint. But be careful with your background. I love the idea in photography. I call it figure ground. The figure is the subject, and that is the whatever the mint is stuck in the top of. I think that's a dollop of chocolate. Um, and then everything else is the background. Make sure the background doesn't compete with the subject. A friend of mine who's a painter, she said they call it structure. And the structure of this, you wouldn't paint that dark thing in the background. So when you photograph it, figure out a way to get it out. And because of that, I gave it a 16.
Fruit bowl still life.
Again, it has this amazing color palette. It looks like, uh, a Dutch oil painting. And here I have these amazing dried leaves that really create this atmosphere of time. To me, the inclusion of time, you do have the fresh fruits, you have the grapes, and then you have the slightly wilted leaves or the dying leaves. So it's given me a duration of time. It's talking about life. It's talking about the harvest time. It's beautiful. I mean, you could have approached it a little bit more of an oblique angle. It's not as huge of an issue with me for this. Uh, but I do question one thing, and if I had to be specific, it's when I look at the highlights. And when I look at the highlights on the grapes, I kind of wish the highlights were a little bit larger. And if you wanted to be even nostalgic, or I would say maybe a little narrative in the storytelling, you could use a softbox and put some black electrical tape across the front of it, so like it was coming in through a window in one of Johann Vermeer's paintings, because they always have the leaded window and the small little pieces of glass. And so that would have been a subtle little change in making the highlights of the grapes appear that they were coming through a window in a small kitchen. Um, but I gave this one a 20. So it's really good in my category. I thought it was beautiful.
Green Goddess.
I love the plants, love the succulents. You know, to me, it's interesting because I'm teaching an art appreciation class, and I'm trying to show them how to tell the difference between a Greek and a Roman statue. And I said, the Roman statues, Julius Caesar looks like Julius Caesar, and then the Greek statue looks like the ideal body shape. In other words, Michelangelo's David is the ideal male, right? Venus is the ideal female. I don't know who this is, but it got me thinking about sculpture when I looked at it, and I like how things can evoke you to think differently. And this one definitely made me think about sculpture, made me think about Greek and Roman sculpture, and I kind of forgot about that there were even plants in it until I kind of pulled back and I thought, oh, it's kind of beautiful. The succulents are kind of like the crown of roses. I mean, we're coming back to the same issue that I had before about symmetry. It's it's like I'm shooting a gun at this individual. We could move off to the left, we could move off to the right, we could crop in uh, just to not try to make it balanced. And there are images that are about balance, but this image here, I'm jumping from the kind of silvery blue succulent on the left to the green succulents on the right. And you don't want me to stop. So get it out of the middle at all possible. Okay. Now, is that true for everything? No. But I think this image would be a little more successful if it wasn't so centered. So I gave it a 15.
Honeycrisps.
Couple things to notice. Notice the highlights on the beautiful apples. To me, if you want to play with that, it appears to be an artificial light. It could be a window. If it was an artificial light, I would do just like I mentioned on the previous ones. I might try to make it look like a window by dressing it up with a couple small pieces of tape on the softbox. I might move the highlight off to the side a little bit. It appears to have a Photoshop filter to make it look more painterly, which it does, which it does. But if we are going into Photoshop and moving it off from its literal photograph, I might take the liberty of removing the sticker that tells us what kind of apple it is. Um, unless you decided to put and leave a sticker on every apple, and then you're making a comment about, contemporary consumerism, how an apple is turned into not only a product with a barcode, which is a little bit more of a contemporary idea. So I might do one or the other. I don't think I could do both. I like the idea of threes. I think threes are special when it comes to composition and photography. Um, but because of the label, it got a little bit distracted. And again, I'd move it off to the left or move it off to the right, use some negative space just to create some dynamic tension within the photograph. So I gave it a 15.
Table tableau.
I wish we still got milk in glass bottles. I think it tastes better when it comes out of glass bottles. I don't know why. um, you know, I love the tabletop. I see the table going off at an oblique angle, but lighting glass is a challenge. You don't light glass; you light what it sees. Meaning that's why we usually, when you photograph a car, you photograph it before the sun comes up or after it goes down, and you use the whole sky as a light source. I do see the thin highlight, on both sides, kind of defining the shape. And I actually can see the label itself. The choice of the vertical line through the top of the milk jug was interesting, you know. At first I didn't like it, and then I thought about it, and it's like, okay, I think it works for me. The only thing I would say about this is I might try to make it look a little bit more real. You've got a rolling pin there. I might throw a dusting of some flour on the tabletop, or maybe a little bit of milk in the milk jug, maybe just a little bit of milk, because we want to make sure we can see that wonderful label. But staging and propping, those are things that are really hard to do. In other words, finding the time appropriate crock, bottle, rolling pin, and then of course tabletop. Technically, I might get rid of that squiggly line that's on the tabletop to the left, and maybe just vignette the left side down a little bit, so I don't leave on the edge, because it is a little bit light. You know, that's just a simple post production idea. But I love the idea of this nostalgic and time. You know, I feel like I'm in the 1950s, maybe 1940s, with the 1 quart milk delivery. Might be somewhere around that time. But I gave it a 16. I got to look at my score sheet. I look down here.
Late night appetizer.
Beautiful. I mean, I would say they handled the transition from the tabletop to the background wonderfully. The table falls out of focus. It gets darker. There's not information back there. In other words, I'm not drawn away. I love how it creates this positive and negative space. And it also helps define the shape of the iced tea. Um, it's complete, meaning I think it's got the whole narrative. Here's my slider. The slider is on a small little piece of wood, a wood serving paddle, and they didn't forget to put the napkin or the plate or the doily underneath it. A lot of times I see people, when they try to create these tabletops, they forget, like, they set a thing up in the kitchen and it's a formal tea set, and they have knife, fork, and spoon. It's sitting on the table. There's no napkin, and you would never do that. I would say this is styled exactly like the food stylist would do for you if you were doing a shot for this restaurant. And I think the propping in the direction of the camera is just wonderful. Wonderful. I gave it a 19.
Figs beet onion pepper.
What you said it's figs, beet, onion, pepper?
Correct, yes.
Okay. This is how you handle backgrounds that you don't want to deal with the transition from the tabletop to the background. You come in from above. I think the handling of the colors is wonderful. I love the use of space, meaning we have strong weight in the lower right-hand corner, balanced off by this large negative space up above. Uh, I think this is one of those images that would look really fun printed big. I mean, printed so the objects themselves are much larger than they are in life. And to me, when I looked at it, I'm like, this would be fun to print on metal, because I bet you printed on metal, that glossy app onion right there would really start to look like it was glistening, like it is in the photograph. I might play a little bit more with some of the negative space. And what I mean by play with that, sometimes you can rake a little bit of light across something, and just dapple some uneven lighting on the background. And it appears to have some almost light painting effects on the wonderful tray. I might just allow that to extend just a little bit more onto that background, to spice it up just a little bit more. But I thought this was beautiful, and I gave it a 17.
Final remains of semen boning.
A found composition. To me, this is where Edward Weston said I should be able to look down at my feet and create an interesting image. And here we have a still life. The still life is arranged. It has some wonderful eroding lines from water, and it still has some water and what appears to be a little bit of foam. So it has this really interesting textural feeling to it, and it has some beautiful colors. It's got that number 3 again, and I like threes. We've got these three, two round, and then we have this rock that's almost chopped off. And the more I looked at it, maybe I saw a scary face, and I like how images can evoke ideas. And when I saw the scary face, I immediately went to like Friday the 13th and a skull, and I don't know why, but it did remind me of that because I think when we look up at clouds long enough, we do see things in the clouds, and I think we look at stumps and roots, we see people, we see different animals, and I couldn't once I saw it, I couldn't get my head wrapped around it that it wasn't uh, a skull in a metaphorical way. I do feel if I had to comment, I feel a little bit cramped, meaning I might just pull back a little bit and allow the three objects to have a stronger weight on a slightly larger canvas. But I'm the kind of person that I like to see the whole dance. In other words, when I photograph people, I want to see hands and I want to see feet, because when someone dances, you see it all. I'm not the person who goes in tight, and that's just how I see the world. I'll go out with friends and shoot on the street, and they've got a 70 to 200, and I have a 16 to 35, and I still can't fit everything I want in a frame, and they come back with everything shot at 200, and it's an amazing. And I'm like, how do you do that? And I think that's what's fun. That's what's fun. But because I would have pulled back a little bit, uh, I gave it a 16.
Pfeiffer House at Custer Ghost Town.
Taken right out of the Eugene Auger textbook of going at an oblique angle. In other words, allowing those diagonals of the tabletop to create a vanishing point to pull us through the photograph. And not only pull us through the photograph, but pull us to where there would be possibly somebody sitting. It is a little interesting because it does appear that somebody was either had just had tea or was setting up to have tea. I don't see any tea bags. I don't see any, but it looks like it could be. It could be coffee. Um, I I understand this is a found object and you probably can't touch anything, but I wish they had put in one of those amazingly handmade doilies that my great grandma used to make underneath some of the things on the table because I think that would have completed it. I think it would have been there. I mean, these are really, really fine china for that type of environment, and I think it would have been all about presentation. And to me, that really what would have sold this would have been one of those hand knit things. Can't blame the photographer because they probably weren't allowed to touch it. But if you're ever going to set up a tabletop and it's a kitchen scene and people are having coffee, I think there would be very fine linen, fine napkin, fine doily, or something in addition to stage it because it's all about the presentation. I love the idea that they concentrated the light on the table. We do have a cup in the foreground. It does have the most amount of light, so it becomes the focal point. It gradually falls off in the background. So it has this really nice depth of light, almost like a Rembrandt painting. If you notice a Rembrandt painting, how it just has this feeling that light was gently poured and then it flowed throughout the scene. So this has a wonderful feeling of light. I gave it a 17.
Pitcher and plate.
Simplicity can sometimes win, meaning I think they've taken away everything down to the bare essentials. And I find the background, the texture, the slight subtle nuances of the background very visually comfortable. Um, the only caveat I would say is we're looking straight on, and if we just pull off to one side or the other to try to create a little dynamic tension to pull us through the still life, I think it would be stronger. Meaning, it kind of appears that the center of of the the bowl of vegetables and lemon is slightly in front of the pitcher. I might have just exaggerated that just a little bit more. Um, the lightness of the pitcher does attract our eye because our eyes are pulled to the lightest and brightest things typically, which is fine. And then I kind of jump back and forth between that and the lemon. The upper left corner of the frame just appears a little bit light. I just might knock that down a little bit. I gave it a 17.
Saltwater elements.
Minimalism, right? It's all about paring it down to just the bare essentials. And to me, it kind of reminds me of the Japanese calligraphy, the simple strokes on the blank white piece of paper or piece of canvas. Um, but if it is about simplicity, this is one of the things that I actually would pull back a little bit more and work with some more negative space. We've got this wonderful almost shooting star coming down from above at a diagonal to what I think is a white shell. Um, I would even just, if you didn't have any more room, I would go into Photoshop and right click content aware fill and just mess around with some of the space, because I would like to see this in a square. Um, and the reason why I'd like to see it in a square is because I think then it would kind of turn those four horizontal marks and that one dot into more of a graphic than realism. And I encourage everybody to look at one of George O'Keeffe's last paintings, and it's just a dot and a line. And this made me think of that, which is a complete departure from reality. It's abstract and an idea, and I would allow this to go in the abstract nature, but I'd make it a square. So, but I gave it a 16.
The makings of mirepoix.
The way they handled the light and the focus or the sharpness, it looks like a Vermeer painting. The textural detail, um, it seemed to me that it was how they handled the quality of light, and how they created this rhythm. I went through the garlic, and then I went through the carrots, then I went through the onions, then I went through the watering can. Um, but to me, it just evoked this beautiful, quiet, soft light, and to me, it was the most intriguing of the bunch, and I gave it a 21.
Iron teapot.
It's amazing how the white pot in the background creates this beautiful profile for the teapot. And to me, this is a still life, but it's a portrait. It's a portrait of a teapot. And they've put the background in a way that it features, the most beautiful part of the teapot, and that is that elegant, kind of like Snake River curve, that we have that goes down to the kettle itself. But I would be really careful in trying to figure out why. And I just want to make sure I don't want to lie. Let me look. Let me make sure. I had to look at mine. They cut off the bottom of the teapot, and to me, it was like you did a portrait of somebody and you cut off their feet. And I just would have pulled back just ever so slightly. And I hope they cropped it off and they can go back and they can show me the foot of the teapot. I loved how the cup, it's hidden in the far left. We see the handle, yet we don't see the whole cup. And I love the picture on the right, how we've used that to isolate the teapot. But because we cut off the foot and it appears to be tilted to the right just a little bit, I had to pull back on my score. I love the tonal palette. And if you look closely on the white picture towards the bottom, you can see what appears to be some lines that go through the highlight that kind of give the illusion that this is an old-fashioned scene, and these are old, picture windows that only had little 8 by 10-inch glass panes, because it's all about creating the narrative, creating that story about time, about nostalgia and long ago. But I gave it a 16.
Parenting.
You know, to me, I kind of jumped into this and it's like, oh, a Tiffany lamp. It's kind of right in the same vibe of the rusty teapot. And then all of a sudden I'm like, what is that green thing? And then I realized that, it's the title of the image that kind of completes the story or completes the narrative. I find it interesting how some images are untitled and it just allows you to bring your own experiences, and yet how an image changes when a title is put on it and then the person who looks at it reads the title, because I didn't read the title until after I looked at the picture. I looked at the picture and I saw a beautiful Tiffany lamp and I saw a bottle of wine, and what is that green handle? And now I get the kind of John Baldessari, the humor idea that to raise a kid, it took a lot of things. They had to smoke cigars when they were born, and that's where they got the brass shoes. And then they made it through, but they had to medicate themselves on the journey. Oblique angle. Turn that table a little bit right or left. I think it'll be everything in the world. You wouldn't notice it, but it just wouldn't abruptly come to a hard line. The other thing is on the background. I love the idea how the light kind of comes down. Be careful with that horizontal line that is above the Tiffany lamp on the wall. It's just distracting, and to me, I just remove it. To me, those things really stand out, and when they stand out to me, it makes me think one of two things. It makes me think, what is the photographer trying to tell me by leaving that line there? Because I know I could take that line out. Or if the line's not supposed to be there, why didn't they take it out? Is it because they didn't see it? So just complete it, because to me, if you look at the way the light would propagate, it would kind of fall off going up, just like it does getting brighter as it goes down. So I think working a little bit more in post would get this one. But I love the idea, and again, because of the idea, I gave it a 18.
Okay, let's see. I don't think we have to break any ties.
I made sure to give the 1, 2, and 3 because I
Yeah,
think
you did. You did so good.
I arranged them just so I didn't make that mistake.
Okay.
Now,
You're
some of
ready.
the other ones, I think all the other ones should be tied for fourth, in all honesty, because I thought they all had wonderful merits to them, but I thought the 1, 2, and 3 were just a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah. We did. Mhm.
Where's 1, 2? Wait a minute.
Okay, we're ready. Oh, we're, this is a Bodhi time capsule by Penny Powell. This is A Breakfast of Champions by Frank Tromp. Chris Everett Roses in Bloom, Larry Decker. Elegant Dressed Chocolate Dessert by Harold Litweiler. Fruit Bowl Still Life by Elaine Calvert in second place.
Nice job, Elaine.
Yep.
Thank you. Green Goddess by Gregory Davna. Honeycrisp by Cheryl Decker. Table Tableau by Ed E. Powell. Late Night Appetizer by Harold Litweiler and third place.
Very nice, Harold.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, you
Yeah,
know what?
make
Like,
me hungry.
yeah, it was good
Yeah.
too.
Figs, Beet, Onion, Pepper by Cheryl Decker. Final Remains of Seaman Boney by Gregory Doudna. Pfeiffer House at Custer Ghost Town by Ed E. Powell. Pitcher and Plate by Larry Decker. Saltwater Elements by Penny Powell. The Makings of Mirepoix by Elaine Calvert in first place.
You earned it.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yes, very
Thank
nice,
you.
Elaine.
Thank
Went
you,
through, I
thank
said, oh my gosh, I don't stand a chance.
Yeah.
Beautiful, it's beautiful.
Oh, thank you, but no, there was a lot of good ones. Iron Teapot by Harold Litweiler. And Parenting, Honorable Mention by Gregory Doudna.
Good job.
Thank you.
Good job.
Okay, we only have 7 monochromes. We'll step through them and then we'll go back and read the titles and have them judged.
A lot of crap in the way again. Why?
Okay, it's our first image.
At the Edge.
When I saw this image right here, I instantly thought of a very, very famous photographer. Everybody should know his still life work. His name was Andre Cortez. He has a similar thematic idea shot, and this is stunning. The use of space, the use of negative space. It reminds me of a still life. It reminds me of a Mondrian with the different size rectangles within the frame. And I love the organic shape of the flower juxtaposed against the really hard, dark rectangle. It's so much fun. To me, when I looked at this, I'm like, everybody else is going to be in trouble because I could go on for an hour about what I like about this. I mean, to me, the background, and then in the end, it's fun to look at because it is balancing on this precipice. So it's creating not only dynamic tension, it also could fall over in reality. So I thought that was just a little icing on the cake. Um, I love the use of the warmer palette, the kind of the sepia, how it's backlit or it's silhouetted. We don't have to always light flowers. We define the shape of the vase with black edges versus white. Um, I gave it a 21. Uh, and to me, I am going to steal this idea. I want to take in 2 cubes, a vase, some water, and a flower, and I'm going to have 21 students see what they can do in the frame. And to me, this is just one of those exercises in what can I do with space and what can I do with my subject and how can I make it work? Beautiful.
Bouquet in black and white.
I think it's slightly different from the other one. I think we're at a slightly higher angle, and if we're not at a higher angle, it's somehow how the contrast of the wood changed how we view the table, because the table seems to be a little bit more prominent. And I don't know if this is the same one that was in color, but I like them both equally for different reasons. To me, the textures of the roses here appeared a little bit, I would say they have more sorrow in them. In other words, they feel like they're a little bit past their prime, and maybe time is starting uh, to have an effect upon them. And I think the flowers are beautiful. I think the background's beautiful. I just kind of wish the tabletop, the planks of wood, just could be softened a little bit. Just it's a little bit too loud, and I would say it's competing. I don't know if you can vignette it down. I don't know if you can just reduce it a little bit, just not to compete with the flowers quite as much, and move it out of the middle. I gave it a 17.
In the parlor.
Again, Andre Cortez has 2 images, one still life with a vase and another still life with a pair of glasses. And how wonderful is this? And then they have the metaphor, the eyes of the world. Um, I used to give an assignment that you would always put glasses in, and we used to cheat because you would take a small little light and shine it from behind and allow it to cast a little focused light through the lenses onto the books just to get that connection. But I think this is beautiful. It's lit like a food product. In other words, from above and behind, we've come up with this wonderful oblique angle. I can see myself sitting in a chair and looking to the left, and there's my reading glasses. They're not red and they're not cool like mine, but I think those are even cooler because those are the old-fashioned kind. If I could be a little bit picky, I might just vignette or darken the small little curtain that's hanging in the background, just so it's a different tone than the doily on top of the table to create that separation and create that distance. But I love how it falls out of focus. It's very eloquent. I think it's very quiet and speaks to a quiet time before we had electronic devices in the world. So the world was a little bit simpler, but beautiful still life. I gave it a 19.
Irish peat hearth.
Wow, could you imagine heating with stuff you chopped out of the bog? Uh, you know, when I looked at this, it's like I was trying to figure out what I could do to try to make the left hand side, just not as strong, meaning I want to look at the beautiful kettle. I want to make that as my center of focus because I think that's what it is because we got the circle and that's where the peat is below it. But we have the window on the left. I'm sorry, the white wall on the left. And I was thinking, I wonder if they'd like drop down and move to the left a little bit. I wonder if they could have goboed off or vignetted the light. But then I kind of thought about that teapot and that black wall behind it. I wonder if maybe they could have just dropped down and shot and isolated that teapot because maybe there's just a little bit of too much stuff for the lighting in the shot. Sometimes it's pulling away to isolate it down, and this kind of ended up being. I think we're trying to include too many things that are pulling for my attention because I love the Dutch oven on the left, and you know my dad has a Dutch oven and he cooks with it when he goes camping, and I kind of get confused on what I'm supposed to have my subject matter because there isn't one thing being featured, and when one thing isn't being featured, I kind of lost what I'm supposed to look at, even though I think I know what I'm supposed to look at. So simplification of this image, and if it's a found object, it's going to be tough. In other words, you've got to weave around this room and try to find the one angle of view to simplify the subject. Uh, so because of it becomes a little bit busy and chaotic, I gave it a 15.
The artichoke.
I almost feel like it's a Greek god artichoke. We've got this wonderful still life. It reminds me of a photograph that I saw done in the 80s by a photographer whose name is Dean Collins. He would do these interesting still lifes. And, you know, you've got these artichokes on kind of a Roman column, kind of. And then not necessarily a crown of thorns, but we have I think those are olive branch down below. So it feels very I feel really like it's like I'm in Greece right now, and we're and this is going back in time. But we need to change just one thing. The artichokes need to get lighter, and then the foreground needs to get darker. We need to move these two spaces, and I would also make the illumination on the background behind the artichokes just a little bit more, just to elevate their importance in the still life and push down the light area in the foreground. And this is just, it would switch the relationship and switch where my eye tends to go. And I'm talking subtle things. I'm talking you could do this in 5 minutes or less in Lightroom. And when you do it, be careful because on the right hand side there is a vertical line right outside the artichokes. And all this beautiful smooth gradation, and I have a line, and I don't know why that little line is there. So smooth that out. I gave it an 18. It's good, but it's not my pick.
Weeds and spheres.
The use of circles and rectangles, and I would say flipping the script or having the edges light and the center dark. I love this. I mean, this should be printed on a piece of uh, vellum, or I've actually printed on silk before for somebody, and the silk is then hung in a shadow box. This is a beautiful piece of art, and I love the organic feeling and the depth that we have. To me, this looks like an old master platinum print, which you know has this wonderful antiquity about it. I have no idea how they did it, but I think it's so beautifully done. Looking at these on a screen, I'd say makes it tougher. Um, if it was printed on a paper like Somerset velvet that had this wonderful texture to it, it would kind of exude this feeling of craft and handmade antiquity, which I think this image does. I think this image would be fun to look at as a small image because it is so quiet and it is so special. But I gave it a 20.
Ramekin and 5 plates.
To me, it needs a blueberry or it needs a single raspberry. It needs a third color element. I mean, I love the high key. They nailed the high key. It's just sitting on this edge. But to me, I would want 3 of something. And we've got, to me, the plates are 1, the goblet or the cup is 2. And I think if you threw in one thing of color and where it went, even if it was a cherry, I think it would totally change the way this image is read. As I look at it, it's an exercise that I give my students. I used to give them an assignment. It's called high key white on white, meaning you had to have white subjects on a white background, and you did it perfectly. But I want you to tell me a story. I want you to create a narrative, and right now, I don't know what the narrative is. I'm waiting for one more element, and I think then it would complete itself. But they did a perfect job of white on white. I mean, what can I say? So I gave it 16.
Okay. Okay. We are ready.
Yep.
At the Edge, in first place by Jim McInnes.
Jim's always on the edge.
Yeah.
If you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space.
A Bouquet in Black and White by Larry Decker.
Very nice.
In the Parlor in third place by Penny Powell.
Nice composition.
Yeah, it was very
Nice,
nice.
Penny.
Thank you.
I love the reflection of the glasses on that book.
Yeah, and the cortege comment was pretty appropriate because I've seen several of his, and that definitely looks like his style.
Irish Peat Hearth by Cheryl Decker.
That looks like Burger King.
The Artichoke by Elaine Calvert. Weeds and Spheres by Jim McInnes, and second place. Great, Jim.
Yeah.
Ramkin and 5 Plates by Jim McInnes.
I think that's super cool, Jim.
Thank you, Ed.
I would like to see a raspberry on there.
I don't
Yeah,
want to see any raspberries. I
that's
want to
a
see any
really good
raspberries or grapes, and I
idea.
like it just the way it is. I think anything else would be a distraction for me.
Well, just for context, I have at least 3 this style, and one of them has not pineapple, raspberry and blackberries on the top plate, and the other one has 2 ramekins, so has three objects. But I created those after I'd already submitted, so that's the way it goes.
It is beautiful. I love the soft tones and nice.
What are you doing?
I'm trying to read his note.
You say what?
No matter.
Thank you for your very thoughtful critiques. Those were great.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks a lot,
Good
Chris.
job, Christopher. Excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
Very
Any,
good,
Yep,
Chris.
yep.
any questions? I mean, I'm just one person, and it's just one voice, and I
No.
try to relate my experiences and what I see.
I really respect your opinions a lot. So they do mean a lot to me. On the artichoke, you said the lighten the artichoke, and did you say to make the foreground darker?
So I could probably find the image, but I would lighten the artichoke
Yeah,
and I would bring down the table underneath. I think that was a branch of olives.
they were
It,
olives.
in other words, you got two competing objects, and I would I would bring the top up and I would push the bottom down. In other words, I would try to direct the viewer to the beautiful cut in half artichoke a little bit more by just having it be a little bit lighter. And right now, it's the same kind of tonality as the table down at the bottom. And I would also probably, if you shot this, it would to make it a little bit lighter behind the artichoke to kind of, I'm not saying create a halo,
Yeah.
but create a silhouette of contrast.
Mm-hmm.
So what it would do is you got the beautiful dark edges of the artichoke, and if it was a little bit lighter back there, it would pull me in to that part of the image faster than it does to pull me down at the bottom. And in other words, they would shift visual weights just a little bit, and that's all.
Okay. Cool.
Very
Thank you.
nice.
My son made that uh, structured, whatever you call that thing, in pottery class, and I always thought someday I'm going to figure out what to do with that. Well, I found a use.
To me, going back to look at Edward Weston's still lifes of, the pepper in the bowl and the cabbage, and using found objects, but not making them look like cabbage. It looks like a dress or a wedding gown,
Right, right.
and to me, the artichoke almost looks like that chest of that armor that they wore in Gladiator.
Oh,
And I think if you change the perspective of the lighting or change the relationship a little bit, I think you could elevate that artichoke to what would be on top of a Roman column.
okay. Thank you.
You said you wondered how I made the still life with the circle and the
Yeah, it's beautiful.
square. Well, I took some brown wrapping paper like you can get at the 99-cent store, and I took a pizza stone and just put it on top of the paper, and I left it there for a couple days, and the oil on the pizza stone made that circle.
So it truly is organic.
It is organic, yeah.
I mean, you can't. I mean, I've got kids that would do that in like 9 layers in Photoshop, and but to see it, I'm sure it's magical, and then to photograph it, to bring it into the camera, and I love the circle, and of course then the hard lines of the rectangle,
Yeah.
And to me, and then flipping the script and having the edges light and the middle dark, I think works quite well, because we're said to make it dark on the edges and light in the middle, and to me, break the rules or break the normals when it's appropriate, and to me, I think it worked. It'd be fun to see. To me, it's a still life and it's quiet, and I would print it, like 5x7, and then I would have it in the 16x20 frame, because it would make it even quieter and make it precious. Because to me, finishing a piece of work like I saw that onion that was glistening, it's like I could just see that on this metal print that was on this glossy finish, and you could feel it, you could touch it, you could taste it. And yours was so quiet, not only the light, the composition, it just needed space to appreciate it.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a good suggestion.
Cool stuff. Thank you, Christopher.
Well, thank you, and don't get too hot.
It's cooling down.
It is. I got the fan in the window blowing air in, but I'm making too much hot air. So
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this hurricane dies off of Baja and what it does to us.
if we could get some clouds, it would be heaven,
As
man.
long as we don't get lightning. No
Well,
lightning.
No, no, we don't need any lightning of any sort.
Christopher, I really want to thank you. You had such interesting ideas about how to improve the images, and some of our judges don't help us with that as much as you did tonight. And even the ideas like that the light reflecting off of things might actually look like the light from a window where you see the panes and, things like that. I don't think about that. And so you really made me think about some interesting ideas so I really appreciate that you share your artistic ability and your thoughts with us.
Well, thank you. To create an image is it's about storytelling, right? And the story of the narrative. There's so many things in pictures that I am convinced that we see subconsciously that we don't necessarily see literally.
Yeah.
And those things resonate inside us. I met a guy who said that whatever you see will forever echo off your soul, your creative soul, right? And so what he said is he always left books of art open around his house, and as he would walk by, he would see these images, and then every once in a while he changed the pages. And I truly believe that. I truly believe that we're building a visual vocabulary, and we get more sophisticated. I see a lot of things done in the commercial advertising world that's done for the wrong reason. It's done to subconsciously make you want to buy something, right? But they're very, very refined because they understand that if I can get the message to you that you all of a sudden are going to react to this image and you don't know why, psychologically, that's what advertising is. But when you create art, you're talking to somebody, and the more beautifully you can play your music, I think you can win the viewer over. And looking at images and looking at the layers of images and how sophisticated I think visually we are will give you a little bit more insight into how you can create images that convey what you're trying to say more effectively. I guess that's it.
Yeah,
I guess that's it.
totally. It's just fascinating. I really, really appreciate having you as our judge tonight. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thanks for inviting me.
Ditto that,
Anytime.
yeah, I really learned a lot.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Anytime.